In today's episode of Bike Fit Tuesdays, we have James Jobber in the studio. He's an elite bike racer competing at national level. He has quite a few issues, specifically a hip injury, which has come on as a result of his extremely demanding racing career. Having sadly missed the Tour of Britain this year due to injury, it's about time Bike Fit James worked his magic.
I think I was away in the brake in a race. I was having like real tightness in my hips. Yeah, because I was away in the brake, I just like carried on pushing. Actually ended up winning, but afterwards I was like in bits. And then I literally was like struggling to put pressure through my right leg after.
James has come in with what we suspect is some sort of tendinopathy in his hip, which is what has been diagnosed as by his physio. So we want to kind of have a look at the mobility of this right hip, particularly under internal rotation, which is excellent. Is there any tenderness in there now? So as we kind of bring it out, no, okay. And external, nothing there either. And as we close the hip, fine, okay, so there's nothing there. The mobility is really, really good. And that can quite often be something that causes us issues on a bike. I'd normally expect sort of 110 degrees in this test, and you've got 130, sorry. That's excellent. 115. So 15 degree difference in hip flexion from left to right.
I think you might have a forefoot varus, which is a forefoot deformity, which is relatively uncommon. In the cycling world, it's considered commonplace, but actually we don't observe that many of them. And interestingly, I think it's more pronounced in the right than the left. I've just got a groovy little tool here we're going to use to put a number on it. 14 on the right and 8 on the left. All right.
40 C/D, 40 and a half. There isn't really a right or wrong answer to these questions. I just want to get an understanding of how you're feeling on the bike. So the first question is, how would you describe the weight on your hands?
Yeah, medium to high, I'd say. I think.
Okay. So if you do your hands off the handlebars?
Right now?
Yeah.
I feel like I'd struggle to.
Okay, fine. Are you clawing with your toes inside the shoes?
No.
Do you think you're completely relaxed then?
Yeah, I'd say generally they feel more relaxed.
My attitude to this is very simple. It's about removing your need to compensate for your interaction with the bike. An example of compensation in this case is sitting on the saddle, the nose of the saddle because the saddle's too high, and pointing the toes through the bottom of the stroke because the saddle's too high. And to be honest with you, in this particular case, I think this is the cause of all of your problems. To start off with, I would normally expect leg extension to be between 138 and 142 degrees with a flat foot through the bottom of the stroke. We've obviously got 149 degrees of leg extension with a reasonable amount of plantar flexion. I can't put a number on that, but it's about 20 degrees. And you're sat with the nose of the saddle. Off camera earlier, I suspected James's saddle height based on his inseam, size of his feet, was probably 20-30 millimeters too high. I suspect that might be the case here. Because on the grounds that if you sit further back into the saddle, your leg extension is going to increase further. This is kind of borderline hyperextension, right? The rest of it kind of looks okay, unsurprisingly. But I sort of feel like I want to do a bit of this, just lower everything. Not necessarily, we don't. It's a racing position. We also need to retain some of the reach, but reach can also be a driver for this kind of gravitation to the nose. And we can back up everything we're talking about here with pressure mapping. So numbers are microbars, they're barometric pressure. And to give you an idea of what I would normally expect from this image is 2 roundels of pressure here and here. I feel like a weatherman here. 2 roundels of pressure here and nothing through the nose. And we sort of don't really need this technology to back up everything that we've said because we can see it clear as day. We can see there's a yard of saddle sticking out the back. This is also consistent with how you feel. There's more pressure on the left-hand side than there is on the right. And I suspect that's because you sit off to the right-hand side. Well, you do sit off to the right-hand side, I'll show you in a minute. This is resulting in this. So you're putting a lot more strain, you're putting postural strain through that right hip. There's no arch support in the shoes. That's going to cause problems because it's going to help. You're going to lose an ability to understand where your feet are in space because there's arch support as a proprioceptive mechanism. It helps us understand where our feet are, which you lose when you put your foot into a cycling shoe. It sounds a bit kooky, but nature didn't intend us to ride in rigid carbon-soled shoes and move our feet in circles. I suspect you might have a forefoot varus deformity. It's basically a skeletally fixed elevation of the first ray. So the first ray is this first line of bones, and in a lot of cases it results in excessive pronation of the ankle joint. Curiously, with you, it's more pronounced in the right than it is in the left, which is also going to be another driver for. There is one curveball, and it's the fact you get pressure on the outside of that left foot. I would sort of expect it to be the right. But to be honest with you, I'm not convinced the stance is sufficient, as in I think your feet could do with maybe going out a little bit further as well, mostly based on the fact that you possess this tibial varum trait, which is really, really common. It's a kind of like slight bowing of the tibia. I don't really know why, I just know that it does almost always require an increase in stance, and actually just the pedal alone might not be sufficient. For the audience at home, James is already riding Shimano's SPD SLE. It's a 4mm extended Shimano axle, which is without a doubt my best selling pedal system at a ratio like 100 to 1. But that we shouldn't necessarily just be dictated by what is widely commercially available. This is all about your needs and limitations. Oh, power! This basically backs up exactly what I was just saying. You've got more or less the same leg extension from left leg to right leg. There is, however, a 6-degree difference in plantar flexion.
Does that mean my left hand calf will be working harder to stabilise?
Yeah, exactly that. And and we can also hypothesize that because your feet are the same size as well, that you're essentially extending this left leg more, which kind of again compounds the fact that you're hanging off the right hand side of the saddle. We can fix this. It's quite straightforward actually. There's a reason I've got a bee in my bonnet about saddle height, because it can cause literally every pain under the sun that we associate with cycling. Hand problems, saddle issues, knee pain, foot pain, like you name it, I can relate it all back to saddle height. So that's why I've got such a bee in my bonnet about it. There's a slightly archaic approach and attitude to assessing saddle height. A lot of it is based on goniometry and the angles of body segments. And to be honest with you, I know I'm talking about angles here. That's not really how I work. We look for quality of motion rather than quantity. But the problem with that for the viewers at home and for yourself is that it's actually much harder to observe quality of motion than it is to observe angles and numbers. We're trying to remove an acceleration through the bottom of the stroke, which when we lower your saddle height, you're going to notice.
You get to around about here at the pedal stroke, point toe in order to get through the bottom of the stroke.
This asshole in the background.
Point the My point is that you're getting to kind of this point of the stroke around the sort of 7 or 8 o'clockish point of the stroke, and you're losing control of the foot, you're plantar flexing the foot to get through the bottom of it. This is the illustrious dead spot. The dead spot that wouldn't exist if we didn't run our saddles too high. And that's given rise to non-round chain rings and all this kind of stuff that I personally don't believe in. I'm not saying you can't ride it. For the people in the comment section, all those keyboard warriors, go and use non-round chain rings if you want to. I personally don't think they really offer that much of a performance benefit. But hey. PSIS, posterior superior iliac spine, either side of the sacroiliac joint. All right, so we've marked that up. And if you consider that bicycle saddles are all designed with the specific intention for you to sit on them symmetrically, okay? And when that doesn't happen, chaos. So what's essentially happening here is you're sat off to the right-hand side for a number of reasons, I suspect. Right foot instability, saddle being too high. Usually when the saddle's too high, riders preference one side over the other. So we can kind of back this up. We can see that so these two dots are basically here on your pelvis, either side of your sacrum. Sacroiliac joint, sorry. And you can see that the left dot is consistently closer to the line than the right dot is. Again, everything kind of lines up. So we've got more extension in the left leg, we've got more plantar flexion in the left foot. We can see that this is sat off to the right-hand side, and as a result, over-interaction with the left side of the saddle, which we've backed up with pressure mapping. For the viewers at home, saddle sores almost exclusively occur on the left-hand side because most people are right-side dominant, and when you run the saddle too high, most people will sit off to their dominant side, usually the right, sometimes the left, but usually the right, which results in an over-interaction, as we're seeing here,
with the left side of the saddle. Cue saddle sores. Got nothing to do with your short fit or your need for chamois cream or anything like that. Do you use chamois cream? No. It's almost exclusively to do with your saddle interaction.
Better. Why? My feet feel more comfortable.
Your feet are further apart now.
Bicycles over the last few decades have become increasingly narrower to mostly enable people like him to pedal through corners. Some of you may remember the triple chain set. Well, we did away with that because of the added complexity, but also it allowed us to get our feet close together. We find ourselves having to find ways to mitigate that. It can be done at the cleat. It can be done at the cleat. It can be done with washers. It can be done with long axle pedals. Right now, so the only change we've made to James's position so far is to increase his stance further at the cleat. He's already using long axle pedals, so I suspect we might need to go even further.
I'd say there's less pressure in the saddle essentially.
Yeah, okay.
And there's also less pressure through my hand as a result.
Yeah. So I've dropped the saddle height by a centimetre as well. So, and as a result, what that means is that we lose the pre-tension in the hamstrings, which for some reason serves as the driver is throwing you in front of the bike. The saddle is no longer a penetrative entity, right? So you're able to sit on it a little bit better. And all of a sudden, you see the back of it. With an increase in stance by a couple of millimetres and a centimetre saddle height reduction, we've yielded a better saddle interaction, less weight on your hands. And the reason the weight on your hands is of importance is that it will dictate to a certain degree the amount of handling characteristics of your bike. If you've got loads of weight on the front of the bike, it isn't going to go around corners. On the contrary, it's always going to want to go around corners. It's going to feel really scatty. And that's what leads a lot of people to go to really long stems. Anyway, don't get me on that soapbox. If you've watched this channel before, you will know that I'm a big fan of these G8 2620s. It's a modular footbed. The great thing about these is we can move the arch support backwards, forwards, in and out, and it has 5 different arch pieces. Cut to length, goes in the shoe really nice and easily, and it's relatively cost effective. More so than a custom, and it's fast to administer. And it works better. Probably shouldn't go too different to yours. Don't cook yourself, but how's that feel? So, 20mm reduction in saddle height. I said 30, but 20. But we've also reduced the setbacks as well. So the saddle has come down and forward. And to be honest, because of the seat angle of the bike, when you lower the saddle, you inherently bring it forward anyway, but I brought it forward a little bit more than we had. The reason for that is a couple of reasons. Firstly, it will take strain off of the hip. We know there's an injury there, it's probably still there, there's going to be some residual tissue damage. So we want to reduce the amount of strain that's being put through that, and by bringing the saddle further forward, we basically reduce the amount of internal rotation that occurs inside the hip. We relieve strain from the hip, essentially. It will also promote a more rearward interaction with the saddle. Handlebar drop is increased, so it's slightly lower at the front end, but that's been carried out at the same time as about a 25mm reduction in reach. And that 25mm reduction to the reach is to the back of the hood, so that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have to change the stem length. 10mm of it is going to be in the setback. The bigger story here is that no arch support in the shoes, insufficient stance as well, I think, and a reduction in saddle height. Those 3 things have been the main changes that we've yielded here.
So yeah, I feel far more comfortable in the fit now. I think from my point of view, this is my 4th bike fit now. Instinctively, I knew something wasn't right with the fit I had previously. I've continued riding that way for 2 years, probably, close to like 60,000 K in that, 50, 60,000 K in that position. The end result of that is me having issues with my back, my hip, just because of the volume of training I do, the intensity I do. But I say just because I had that fit in the back of my head, that was my reference point. So I was kind of reluctant to change the position from that. I think my message to anyone watching is don't be afraid to play around a little bit if you think instinctively something isn't right, but definitely either go back to your bike fitter or consider getting a fit from someone else. Just as I say, if something's not right, if you don't feel comfortable in the saddle, don't just push through, because as I say, you end up in my position with, well, spending money on a physio rather than a fit. I'd say I feel like a fit is a bit more of a proactive approach rather than getting to the point where you need to see a physio to address the issues you've caused from your fit. And I say, you solve those issues, or you're going to be back to square one when you're riding in the same position after.
People go to a bike fitter, just to echo what you've said, and they sort of expect it to all be right. And the state of bike fitting is an industry, not all bike fits created equal. I don't proclaim to be the messiah, but I see some people come through here who have had bike fits, and I don't have to do anything. I might change their shoe setup a little bit, but I get some people who've had bike fit, and I've had to lower the saddle height by 5 centimeters. So not all bike fits is created equal, I think, is the point that I'm trying to make. But I would also agree with James in that if you're having problems having post fit, having had a bike fit, go back to the fitter. If it's not right, and if they're worth going to, they'll want to fix it for you. They'll want to solve it for you.
The more demand you put on your body, you're going to get to a point where something gives way, particularly if the fit is wrong. So that's why it's kind of like, okay, right, you increase training volume. And I remember even when I first started, it was like, okay, you go away in a training camp and all of a sudden I came back with a knee injury. Cycling's viewed as, if you pick up a running injury, it's like get on the bike. It's a really kind of safe sport to do. Safe in the sense of like, you're not going to pick up injuries. But the reality is you're fixed in this position. And if that position is incorrect, you're going to pick up injuries.
Do you want a job?